Fraction.
All right, evaluating algebraic expressions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this word right here, and this word right here. Right? So when we talk about an expression, what do we mean in algebra or in pre-algebra? An expression is simply anything that doesn't have an equal sign. Okay? So the number 2 could be considered an expression. 2x could be considered an expression. 2x plus 17 could be considered an expression. 16xy minus z plus 5 times 3abc could be considered an expression. Expressions, this is kind of a silly example here. It's kind of long and nonsensical. It's got a lot of different things in it. But expressions are collections of terms. So they're made up of terms. And when we say a term, we mean something like 2x or 17. So if an expression is a collection of terms, then we have to ask, well, what's a term? A term is a number and then possibly also and a variable. Okay, so a term could be something like 2x or 17. Those are terms. Now the thing about expressions is they don't necessarily equal anything. There's no equal sign here. Sometimes we can evaluate expressions, right? Like if I said 3 plus 5, this is technically an expression. It's made up of 2 terms. The first term is 3, and the second term is 5. We could evaluate that into one number, though, which is what? 3 plus 5 is 8. And so then we've simplified that expression. So with expressions, we're not solving for anything, right? We're simplifying or evaluating, right? In this case, I would say evaluating, because we found that 3 plus 5 equals 8. Now, equations we'll get to a little bit later. Equations are when we have an equal sign. Now, what makes an expression algebraic? To me, what makes an expression algebraic is that it uses variables. Okay? So, if I have something like 7x minus 10 plus 6y, is this an expression or an equation? It's an expression because it has no equal sign. Right? We can't solve it. There's no way to solve it. And we really can't simplify it either because 7x can't be combined with 10. There's no way to simplify it. But I would consider this to be an algebraic expression because it uses these letters, x and y, which in algebra we call variables. And variables can mean different things in algebra, but we're going to say that they're letters that stand for unknown quantities. So x is representing a number. X in a way is a number, but it's an unknown number. I don't know what x is until I do. So in algebra, a lot of times what we're going to be doing is we're trying to find x. where we're trying to figure out what y could be. And algebra is all about using variables, right, so that we can find patterns and make generalizations. But in this case today, we're just going to get used to what a variable really represents. Okay? So for example, can I erase this? For example, if I have the expression 3x, there's nothing I can really do with that right now. It's just 3x. But if I said, evaluate this expression when x equals -2. What it's telling me is, okay, in this expression, x is an unknown. But someone found out that x is equal to -2. So what I'm going to do, I call this plugging in, right? I'm going to plug in -2 into this expression. So instead of writing x, I'm going to put parentheses -2. So 3x really means 3 times x. 3 times -2 is what?
Wait, time?
Yeah, because we're multiplying these numbers.
No.
Okay, so it's going to be 3 times 2 is 6. And then we have a positive times a negative. Is that a negative or a positive?
No, negative.
Which one is it?
No.
Let's think about our rules. A positive times a positive equals a positive. A negative times a negative times, when we're multiplying, that's a positive. They cancel each other out. But then do you remember if I had one of each? That's a negative, right? There's nothing to like cancel out the negative. So 3 times -2 is an example of which one of these? Am I doing a positive times a positive? Am I doing a negative times a negative? I'm doing a positive times a negative, right? Yeah, so my answer would be negative. Okay, so let's try this. And this is really important for a lot of reasons. Like, why are we doing this? But the main reason that you're going to end up using this skill, this strategy, later on, is to check your work in algebra. Okay? So let's say I had something like this. 4x plus 2. And I want to evaluate that if x is equal to 3. So if x is equal to 3, I'm going to take that 3 and plug it in here. For now, I'm just gonna tell you what x is equal to. Eventually we'll get to the point where you're trying to figure out x and then you plug it in to check it. But for now, this is what the problem would look like. Evaluate this expression if x is equal to 3. So I'm going to take the 3 and I'm going to plug it in for x. Now what does 4x mean? It means 4 times x. So I have 4 times 3 plus 2. Now I have to remember order of operations. Am I going to do 3 plus 2 first or 4 times 3 first? Yeah, what is 4 times 3? 12 plus 2 is 14. So here's what your homework will look like. Your homework will look like this. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of values for different variables. Maybe we have n equals -1, m equals 7, a equals 6, b equals 3, and c equals 2. And then I'm going to give you expressions. So we might start out with something fairly simple like what we've been doing. M plus 3. What I'm going to ask you to do is find what m equals up here, plug it in, and tell me what that expression equals. So what would m plus 3 be? It would be 7 plus 3, which is 10.
I got it.
Okay, what if I had one that's a little more complicated? 3 plus 2n.
3 plus 2 negative 1.
Okay, so the n is negative 1. So I've got 3 times 2 plus negative 1.
Okay, 2 times 1 is 2.
So I'm going to multiply first. 2 times negative 1 is what? Negative 2. So I've got 3 plus negative 2, which is what?
Take away 3, take away 2 is 1.
Yeah, so it's the same thing as 3 minus 2, which is just 1. What if I had something like this? A, B, plus M.
Okay, so A is 6, B is 3, plus
So do I write it
7.
like this?
No, the 3 would be in parentheses.
Sure, because we're going to do 6 times 3, right? So I have to remember. And then what's M?
M is 7.
Nice.
So then 6 times
So I've
3
plugged
is
everything
18,
in.
plus
6
7
times
would
3 is
be
18, 7, 20. Now, what if I had something a little bit more complicated? What if I had something like this? B minus n m.
So
So
B
why is this one complicated?
is 3
Okay, so B is 3.
minus N is N is negative 1. Negative 1 times.
So what does this even mean? I plugged it all in. Like,
It's plus and then, no,
It's,
no,
you add the 3 and the
1
what?
times 7 is 7, and then 7,
you add
3
the
plus
1 is
7,
4.
so I have to start with the multiplication, right? So I've got 3 minus. Well, hold on. That's what I think. What you guys are doing is jumping ahead a little bit. So I've got 3 minus what? What is negative 1 times 7?
is negative 1. And then it's plus.
Negative 7.
And then it's
What do
plus
I have here?
7.
What does this mean right
Well, remember you gotta pull apart the
here?
negative.
Minus a negative means plus, right? Plus. So what is 3 plus 7?
10. Wow.
Yeah. So do you see? It's really important that, because when you look at these, sometimes you think, am I multiplying? Am I adding? You have to keep track of what operations you're doing in each case. Right? What if I had something like this? This is going to look a little funny when we plug it in. What if I had Cn? That's it. What does this mean? C
C is 2, so
times n. So we have 2.
2 times 1 is 2.
Would I write it like that?
I wish you
No, but then you have to pull it apart. So basically, it's just 1. It's
Yeah.
just
why it's 1.
So is it 2 minus 1?
It's 2 times.
Yeah, we have to remember
Negative
C times n. Cn means C times n. So I'm doing 2 times negative 1. It doesn't matter how I write it, but I have to remember I'm not going to add these together. I have to multiply it. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Right? So I heard some people saying 1. That would be if we did C, right? If we did C plus n, then we'd have 2 plus negative 1, which is 1. But these are very different. Even though when you write them, it's kind of easy to confuse. Like, oh, the negative a minus sign, or is it a negative? So keep track of your negatives versus your minus signs. A minus sign, typically when I'm writing by hand, I'll write a negative kind of like if I had, let's just erase all of this. If I had 6 minus 3, I'd write it like that. But if I had 6 and then times negative 3, I like to write the negative symbol a little smaller and a little closer to the number and a little higher. You know what I mean? It just keeps you, it helps you keep track of, am I multiplying like here, or am I subtracting like here? Those are two totally different things. And you can always look back to those expressions to figure out what you're supposed to do. All right, let's try this one. A plus mn. So what's A?
A equals 6 plus
What's m?
and 7 times oh my god.
-1. So 6 plus 7 times -1. What do I do first?
7 times
Go ahead.
1 is 7. -7.
Okay, so 6 plus -7.
6 take away
Equal -1.
-1.
-1. Exactly. Same thing as 6 minus 7, right? All right. I think you guys are ready for some practice.